Welcome to another LinkedIn Live for Well Workplaces. And today I'm really pleased to be chatting with Katie Richards, who's the founder of Law on Earth. Katie, welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us all the way from sunny Queensland. How's it going up there?
Yeah, look, we're pretty lucky in Queensland. We've had a few little snap lockdowns, but to be honest, we get perfect weather most days. And so we really need to be getting out and about as much as we can. But we're quite lucky.
Yeah, exactly. Your winters don't really count up there. They're actually quite nice. I'm sitting here today in Melbourne. It's pretty windy outside in my outside in the backyard. But anyway, it is an interesting time, Katie, across Australia, especially up the East Coast at the moment, with so many lockdowns, as you mentioned. There's a lot of stress in the small business community, and there's different reasons for that stress. Some of that links in with financial stress and pressure. Some of that, I guess, also links in with sometimes legal concerns as well. So the real reason for getting you on today is because I think in terms of overall well-being, what we tend to look at, people tend to think of, I need to be physically fit or I need to be mentally well. Well, one of the big things that impacts people's personal well-being is actually their financial well-being and their career well-being. So their ability to, earn a good crust and be passionate about what they do. And then when there's a pandemic, like there has been for now a long time, all of that gets stirred up and interrupted. And I'm an SME owner and so are you. So you know the pressures at the moment. And one of the things that I've, learned over the last 12 months is the power of good advice, good legal advice in particular, and not being afraid to ask for advice at the right time. And I think a lot of people are scared of speaking to lawyers. So you're a friendly face and we know each other. So I thought it'd be a great opportunity to share some knowledge and just talk about some of the issues right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, one of the reasons I think why people are actually scared of talking to lawyers, Tom, is because it's often around that cost factor. Firstly, they don't know what it's going to cost from the outset, and they're worried to ask questions because some lawyers will just start, turn the clock on the second they pick the phone up, and some won't. Some will give you a little bit of free time, but you don't know that until you've actually picked the phone up. And so, especially where it could be financial issues that these guys are dealing with. They don't want to get themselves into even more hot water, but by putting their head in the sand, they tend to do that anyway. And I think the other side of it too is that there hasn't been an easy way to get information how to sort of work out what the next steps are for someone in a particular scenario, even though there's probably thousands of people in exactly that same scenario at this same time. And so because of that, when they speak to a lawyer, they sort of feel like they feel silly asking questions, and they feel like they should know this stuff because they're an intelligent person. They could be a high-end CEO, or they could be an engineer, or they could be a nurse, they could be a stay-at-home mum or dad. But at the end of the day, they sort of think they should know this stuff and they just don't. But, it hasn't been easy to get the information.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people, when they jump into take the dive into small business, they're often coming from backgrounds where they've been great technicians in their particular field. So, for example, my background is a physiotherapist, and I was good at running the clinic and being the physio. And then suddenly, 10 years later, I'm running a business, and I don't know all the things that you don't know what you don't know. But you're right. I do remember that first call that I had with a lawyer many years ago, setting up maybe a retail lease or something like that. And I was well out of my depth, but I was quite happy to be like, yeah, you're the man. You know what you're doing, not me. So, but I think you're right. The cost factor is probably a big one. Before the chat, Katie, I had a look at SMEs in general and just some of the stats around it. So I wouldn't mind just throwing some things in there for our listeners. Now, SMEs actually make up about 97% of businesses in Australia, and there's different sizes. So there's from 0 to 19 employees, there's about 2 million of those. Medium-sized businesses, they're classified as any 20 to 199 employees. There's about 50,000 of them. And then the large ones is about 200 plus employees, is about 3,700 of those, according to the research that I've done. So, 97% of businesses in Australia are SMEs. It really means that those people that are affected right now, it's impacting obviously the economy at a pretty crazy rate, but it's also impacting the employees that work in there, which is also, devastating, and obviously has a lot of implications. So, I thought I'd throw that in there because that's obviously a lot, right?
That's huge. Yeah, it's absolutely massive. And the thing, like you're saying too, is that it's not just the small businesses that get impacted; it's their employees that get impacted. And then if a small business goes down, then the people lose jobs, and then that impacts the other partner if it's in a family, or it impacts a lot of other people. Other suppliers don't get paid, so it has this massive ripple effect right across the community.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Katie, before we get into some of the I guess some of your observations in the current climate, I'd like to maybe just, if you could just tell us a little bit about, I guess, your why you got into law and just your overall passion in that space, or who you are as well.
Yeah. So I actually I was a country town girl. Grew up in North Queensland in a tiny town called Ayr, where I'm literally related to the entire town. And then I sort of, when I eventually came down to the city in my later years to go to university, I had actually started studying in the medical science space. And then I switched over to legal when I realized, there was such a big problem with this access to justice. And so I became a lawyer myself. I'm a lawyer here in Australia, New Zealand, and in the UK. And I got into the legal tech space specifically because I just thought there had to be a better way to do things. And I was spending so much of my time outside of hours, outside of my job, helping other people, like create little guides so they can understand what they're doing with their legal problems. Because everyone comes to you, it's like, oh, you're a lawyer, so you must be able to help me with something. And it's almost like you had an obligation constantly to help. So I was like, there's got to be a more efficient way to be able to help these people when they did come to me, on my weekends. And then I sort of started doing a bit of research around it. And in 2013, I went, right, that's it. I have to start something now and put everything I've got into it to start addressing these problems, because they're massive. Like 74% of Australia can't afford legal help. And whether that's because they can't, or whether they think they can't because of the problems we talked about before, like they're too scared to even try because of the unknown costs. So I think that probably plays into it as well. So I'm pretty passionate about, making sure we can find a way just to make things a bit more fair, to be honest, so that everyone has got that basic level of open legal support, whether they're an employee, a business, an individual, mums and dads, whoever it is, just everyone should have that. We use Medicare to find a way to get medical help. So why are we not finding a way to get, a basic level of legal access to absolutely everyone? So I could harp on about it all day.
I love it. And I think, I'm coming from a health background, and a lot of our listeners in our Well Workplaces community are coming from the wellbeing space, whether that's HR or they're, health experts. And we know that there's a lot of effort recently into telehealth. And I think telehealth is a word that most people can, link in and understand what that means. But with Law on Earth, which is your beautiful creation, it's telelaw, which is, for me, that was a new word in my head recently after meeting you a little while ago.
Yeah.
Katie, what are some of the legal issues that impact people's personal well-being, and just from your experience through creating your business, but also just through your experience as well as a lawyer? What are some of those key things?
Yeah, look, in terms of the what we're sort of seeing around the small business space, you're seeing people are getting into issues around not understanding their contracts, or just trying to find stuff on Google and then pulling them in and saying, okay, well, it says supplier agreement, this must be fine. I'll change the name on the top and then sign the back. And they don't understand what's going on. So the way that we've set the world up is that we've got all this what's called like protective legislation that's meant to be there to help us and stop things from happening in certain circumstances. But you can contract out of some of the rights that you would have in that scenario. So we're finding that people are sort of trying to avoid the cost of legal, and they're going down that path, and they're getting documents that actually put them into more hot water than if they didn't have any contract in place at all. So that's where some of these problems are happening. In sort of the COVID space now, we're also finding that a lot of leasing issues are sort of coming up as well in the business space. And we're also finding that when people are having interpersonal problems, a lot of divorcing is going on. And then that's also impacting businesses as well. So people, don't have their eye on the ball. So we're seeing these kind of issues that are going on. But on the employee space, we're then also seeing, like around where people aren't able to deal with home issues that are going on, they're bringing it to work. And in many cases, the stats are showing around, say around 3 hours a week that employees are putting into trying to find resolutions to what they're dealing with. And then when they're bringing these problems to work as well, Tom, is that they're actually not just impairing their own productivity in the workplace, but they're affecting everyone else around them. And that does two things. That's number one, bad for the business, but that also jeopardizes their employment. And they're getting bad reviews from their supervisors, and some people are actually losing their jobs. I was surprised at the stats I saw the other day. It was around like 12%, I think, from a certain study that was done of people who actually lost their job as a result of having to deal with legal issues. And and they so then they've lost their income as well. So if you don't even have any income, then they're losing their home. So it really sort of spirals out of control where they don't do something about it. And the other thing I saw in this study too was that where people were actually reaching out during work hours, it was taking up to several hours during the week for them to go away. And then the anxiety building up for them in having to ask for that time off during the day, especially when, there's a lot going on for employers and employers are stressed at the moment, having to ask for time off to go and deal with personal issues just wasn't going down real well in the workplace. So they were getting anxious about it and spending even more time not doing their jobs because they were just stressing about asking for time off. So these are some of the things that we've been seeing going on quite frequently in the market now, especially with all the COVID issues going on.
Yeah, it's a really interesting take because I think everyone knows at the moment that mental health is a big issue, and we know that the cost of say a psychological injury, the cost of that happening in the workplace takes goes for a long time. It's very hard to get people back into work, but we never really. It's a bit silly, isn't it? We never really think about what's going on. Well, we do, but we maybe don't have the solution to address it. So what's happening in their home life, when you dig deeper and you're seeing the kind of the end of that, which is I'm going through a separation perhaps, which is huge, and make sense of how that could absolutely ruin your day, not to mention your year, and trying to find a solution in amongst that it hurts my head thinking about straight away. So yeah, that's quite interesting. And the other one you mentioned was the employers maybe being in these leases, like I'm assuming commercial leases, and it's a hectic space. I understand that space because I've had those issues as well and worked through them in the last year. It is tricky and stressful as well when you don't know, when you're not a lawyer, you don't know how to read the contracts and understand your obligations and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you also don't understand, what you can negotiate in. Like you're missing opportunities that you could have taken to take a heap of pressure off you as well. And the opportunity may be worth sort of $500,000, a couple of $1,000, but people are like, well, it's going to cost me a couple of grand to go and get a lawyer to help me with this. What's the point? Whereas that's not necessarily the case. And what we're seeing is that then people are becoming more unwell just from the anxiety side of things. And so it really creates that cycle, is that once they're sort of becoming mentally and physically unwell, then they're not thinking straight, and then they're not running their businesses properly. They're not working correctly. They're bringing those issues home. It's upsetting their home life, bringing it back to work. So everyone is sort of suffering because of one thing that may have been able to be solved relatively quickly.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's kind of made me appreciate over the years is the power of good advice, whether that's from a lawyer or an external expert in their field. Given that we spend so much time in well-being, we talk a lot about employee assistance programs, and there's a lot of information coming out now about, the psychosocial factors impacting people's workplaces and a fair bit going on in that area. Where do you think legal support fits in when it comes to employee well-being? I guess it's never really been, I don't feel like it's being talked about much. So what do you think?
We're actually seeing a lot more of it. Now. We've been approached and have been working for some time with several different sort of different sized businesses who are essentially saying, look, we do all these different perks for our businesses, like gym membership. So gym membership, even that's going to cost probably $1,500, $2,000 a year. Whereas they're saying, okay, well, they're not going to the gyms because the gyms are shut. And so what we want to do is we want to replace that benefit for them with something that's actually going to address the issues that are coming up in their life, whether that's counseling, whether that's getting the legal assistance packages put in place. So they're there if they need them. They don't have to go and access a lawyer just because it's there. So it's not necessarily a cost straight away for the employer, but just the employee knowing that the employer actually has their back. And if something comes up, there's no stigma around, oh, you're going to need to go and get some legal advice. And they also don't have to take the time off work, because they can, if they use something like what we're doing, then they could actually bring the lawyer right up there and then in the lunchroom, in a quiet place by themselves. And then, 20, 40 minutes later, they've dealt with whatever they needed to deal with. And so it's just taking that anxiety away from the issue around actually engaging a lawyer in the first place. I think a lot of people, as soon as they find out that I'm a lawyer, they go, oh, well, I've never needed a lawyer. Like, oh, that doesn't mean you're a criminal because you need a lawyer. You actually might be an intelligent person taking an opportunity, and learning how law works. So it just takes away that negative connotation around stepping up, getting help, and actually being proactive with their lives. So I think that fits really well into the employee assistance program side of things, because the employee assistance is all about making sure that your employees are in the best position they can be physically, mentally, and that really gives them the opportunity to say, hey, if I need this, then I know that I can reach out and ask for it or access it easily without feeling like I owe someone something, or, and I think it's a good way to do it.
Yeah, I really like the idea. I think, as I was saying before, like there's a lot of effort and energy spent on EAP programs. And I guess through this rapid change in the workplace at the moment, where the workplace, especially say in, Victoria, say compared to Queensland, like you guys have probably been in your offices a bit more in the last 12 months than we have. And so a workplace now is everyone's home as well. And, if you've got a home environment that's a bit NQR, or maybe you've got those issues at home, which are, what you were saying before was the business owner hypothetically is at home and they're going through a separation at the same time. That's just so much. There's just so much to that problem. There's so much stress. And there's the connection through to you can speak to a psychologist. And I think that's been destigmatized, if that's a word, in the last 12 months, because people are talking a lot more about mental health. But you could easily kind of go, all right, let's speaking to a lawyer is not a big deal anymore. I feel like there's still a little bit of that to go in the workplace, I guess, and also just in the community.
That's right. Yeah, it's really all around that normalization. And like you're saying with psychology, just normalizing, mental health is just something, if you've got a cold, you go to see the doctor, or you go and take something for it. So why on earth are we not, sort of normalizing more rapidly around this whole mental health element? Just awareness is not enough. There still is that stigma, like you're saying. So it's the same with legal, like you wouldn't probably need quite as many psychology sessions if you just dealt with the root cause of what's causing you to be so stressed out all the time. So it's like, well, don't just grab the tree by the leaves, grab it right from the bottom of the root and pull it out and deal with what's happening. But yeah, I totally agree.
I love it. And in the workforce at the moment, Katie, if you think about, the different segments as employees as different segments. So in my head, there's a lot of baby boomers, there's millennials, and obviously in those, and, if you're in your 20s, you're probably focused more on yourself. You're probably taking more, these are all generalizations, but you're taking more risks, maybe a little bit more selfish in your career. And then your 30s, you may be getting married and settling down, perhaps buying a house. In your 40s, you're trying to earn a little bit more, and so on. So each life stage basically has their potential stresses, but also opportunities. Do you feel like at each, I'm just interested in, like, say in your, there's a big makeup now of millennials in the workforce. For that particular segment, I'm imagining that they've got certain stresses. I'm wondering from your perspective, what would be the top, few things that they should, or maybe that they're often getting themselves where they need legal help, but that maybe they've never sought it before?
Yeah, I was actually really surprised. We've done quite a bit of like the estate planning for the younger guys. And I think it's because they're quite proactive in setting up like little online businesses or doing whatever they're doing, and they're trying to get their debt under control and work out what they want to do, get into the property market. Information for them is at their fingertips these days, so it's really easy for them to learn and get ahead. And we're finding that they're trying to do things, like setting up their estate plans, which usually you'd expect to come from the baby boomers. And look, they're still doing their estate plans too. But a lot of them probably have thought about these kind of things already. They've already spoken to a financial planner. So I find it really interesting that the planning that's actually going in for these younger guys, and doing things like, their powers of attorney, so that they've got someone to step in to keep their things working if something happened to them, like if they got sick. Are you seeing a bit of that also around the family, sort of the middle-aged crowd as well? But yeah, it was surprising for me to see that in the younger crew, because usually everyone's too busy, living to get on with dying. And so they just don't put thought to it. They're also the ones that are sort of, going down and thinking about new ideas and innovation, and then using, around the business advice. And I've actually found a lot of people sort of jump on and chat to me about just pitching me an idea. They're not really even chasing legal advice, but they just want to know, before they go and throw all their life savings at something, is this worth actually, doing something about, or even something they thought about at work, and they're pitching, and before they go and speak to their manager, they'll come pitch us in the platform. And some of the other things we're seeing too is we're doing sort of a lot of the like parenting plans for people that are, have children around probably the 5 to 10 year bracket, because they don't want to wait, for an extended long period of time to go into a mediation. They want to be able to deal with it right now. They know that they can work together and get the right document pulled together, and then individually get some advice in that space online without even having to leave home. So they can do it really fast and do it in a way that's still amicable before things blow up between them over something else. So we're seeing that a fair bit in that, young to middle age bracket, say between maybe the 25s to 35s.
That's really savvy by those younger guys. I mean, when I was 20-ish, I wasn't definitely not thinking of my future. I wasn't really thinking of my future that much. I was thinking of my future, but I wasn't like going, all right, let's risk manage my ideas and all this kind of thing. That's really cool to hear, because I guess the reason for the question is because there's so many, the workforce, makeup is changing dramatically, isn't it? I think by 2023, I think 75% of the workforce globally is made up of millennials. I think that's a stat. So those people, they need certain things, and their stresses are certainly different to my parents' age, where they're probably all set up. So yeah, it's quite interesting to learn what they're thinking about. And maybe if you're an employer or an SME, you might be thinking, okay, I've got a young, maybe, I don't know how old you are, Katie, but I'm sort of late 30s, and a lot of our employees are kind of maybe late 20s. So I'm often thinking, okay, what would they, in an employee wellbeing program, it might not be something that I think of, but what do they want? And sometimes it's really about asking your staff, because that's where the answers are often of what they need. So connecting them maybe to those solutions is potentially a good idea.
Yeah, look, I think the millennials are really great at looking at opportunities. Like, they can see an issue and, or even just see, a boring old process in a business they're coming into. And someone explained it to me once, that the reason they do it is because they're just lazy. And I said, well, lazy or not, whatever reason they're doing it for, if they're doing it in a way that's actually creating innovation within their workplace, good for them. I think innovation is just the new norm. People expect that they have to be innovative. So these younger guys, they don't hold back in finding ways to actually bring innovation to either their own business or into their workplace, so they can just rise up the ranks more quickly, because there's just like this culture that's like, well, if you're not some kind of entrepreneurially minded person, then you're not normal. And it's like, well, no, that's not really how it is. But hey, look, if they're going to bring all this incredible stuff to a workplace, why not give them the opportunity to be able to go and test it before they sort of, put it in front of someone who may think, oh, well, that's just dumb. Whereas at least if they can go back and go, I've done my research, this is what it looks like. Great. What do you think? Then they can, shoot up the ranks quicker.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's also, the workplace is changing at a very fast pace. I mean, we've worked with corporates now in our business for almost 15 years. And, when we started, people were coming to work in suits and ties and carried around Blackberries, and they'd sit at their desks 9 to 5 now. And they'd have a manager as well that they were kind of scared of. So nowadays, you can see these workplaces being, hybrid, obviously home, work whenever you need to. Basically, it's more about outcomes. And as those millennials come in, they're already in, they've got those creative ideas, whether it's them being lazy or they're being smart. I think there's a quote around someone, laziness is actually being something about being genius. It's quite interesting. I think with the rapid evolution of the workplace, I'm wondering, in your view, what are some of the legal considerations for people to think about now that, there's going to be more gig economy stuff happening, a lot of people working from anywhere? What are some of the things that you think about from your legal angle?
Yeah, look, Tom, I've done a lot of like little risk assessments with a lot of people online, and some of the things we're looking at, and I sort of highlight for them, is have a look at every one of your staff members right now and have a look what their job responsibilities are. What we're finding is that because people have had to actually change their responsibilities quite substantially, especially those who are constantly working from home, they may actually be doing things outside of the classification of the award that they're employed under. So if they're taking on all these extra things, it actually may be the case that they're no longer a level 2. They may actually be acting as a level 3, which can, number one, cause the employee to get disgruntled if they know they're having to do all these extra things. And then the employer may not even realize, because they're focusing on whatever they are doing and they're not sitting beside this person anymore. So they're just not noticing all the extra work. And it also could mean that they're not paying the right rates, and then the employee could get fined by Fair Work. So that's one of the things I say first, just work out how these changes have actually impacted the roles and what people are actually doing, not just what is written down in their contracts. The other thing too is around duty of care, around how people are actually set up at home. I mean, the employer probably isn't going to go into your house, especially if you've got many staff, and check out what's going on there. But if something happens, technically you would still be covered under a work cover policy. And so the employer is going to have to be able to say, yes, these are the steps that I took to make sure my employee is in a safe position, because it's what's called a non-delegable duty. So you can't pass that risk off to someone else. And, of course, unless they're maybe like a contractor and you had that in an agreement with them, but an employee, that's your problem. So you have to work out how to minimize risks of, injuries that they might have at home too. So they're probably the two that we see the most.
Yeah, that's a really interesting, and I love that one about just role clarity. I think one of the best things that's come out of the psychosocial risk management type stuff that I'm reading a lot more about is, one of the best things you can do for someone's well-being in a workplace. It's not yoga, and it's not, providing fitness classes. It's actually giving them role clarity, and what's written down on a piece of paper, I guarantee doesn't match the last 6 months of what people have actually been doing. So it's a really good tip there on the employer side. What about employees? Is there anything that they need to think about, given that, they are like, if they're working in an SME, is there anything that comes to mind in your head that they should be thinking about, or maybe tick off from a legal
Absolutely. So the Australian privacy principles can be very heavily impacted for the employer by what the employee is doing. So if you think about, your employees now at home, they may not be on the same server, there may not be the same sign-ins, they may be storing all these things on a home computer, like private files of a client's identification. What happens if their house got broken into, their laptop was stolen, and they've got all this private information easily accessible? That could be a data breach. Again, that could then cause a big fine for the employer, which could be enough to shut the business down, and then no one has jobs, right? So they need to consider about what they're doing in terms of safety and security, and data transfer, not just where they're storing it. So there are things like that they really have to have a think about too. And also, when they're having private conversations, who can hear them? If they're at home, say if they're in a house and there's, they got 3 or 4 flatmates, one of the other people they're living with, they actually might be acting on the other side of a matter. So, like they could hear private information that they probably really shouldn't. Or, you could have issues of insider trading from someone else hearing what you're talking about with your board, and then going and doing something about it on the back end. So there are certain things that are really impacted by this rapidly changing environment and people having to work from home, but not working in an isolated environment, which probably is the case. If you're in your gym jams and you're working from the lounge room, there's a good chance that there are other people that are listening in on what's going on or can easily access a lot of your work stuff that normally you'd maybe have to swipe in and swipe out of a floor for to get access to yourself.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, you've really just opened up my brain a little bit there with some potential I guess things that I
Sorry
should
about that.
consider. No, it's good. That's why we're talking. Really great. And my last question or last thought there, Katie, is just in regards to the future of work from your perspective. You've obviously developed a relatively online business through Law on Earth. Where do you see the rest of, I guess, where do you see the future of work going in your space, in the legal space, just out of interest?
Yeah, look, what we're doing at the moment is that so the way the Law on Earth essentially operates is it's a self-service tally law platform. So it not only does the tally law, but it teaches the public how to actually manage their own legal issues. And that's done through a lot of really easy to understand education. So they get what next steps are. They understand why they're being asked questions by the lawyers. Same questions that they're asked, then they can then use those questions and they give a simple answer to what they want, and the system slots all the clauses in. So it basically acts like a lawyer, and then they still have they can do basically 90% of what they need to do. So the lawyers still step in the recorded sessions for the last 10% and clean it up for them. I think given that we're creating such an accessible way to use legal, I think people are actually going to start trying to get among opportunities more often. And for that reason, we're bringing a lot of the law firms to actually work directly from the platform. So it sends cost agreements back and forwards for lots of different types. So I think in terms of the legal space, I believe that this type of platform, hopefully ours, no one else has built anything exactly the same as this yet. So, but hopefully these firms will actually start just using the platform as an actual marketplace to completely operate from. So people will get used to working in that online space as opposed to going back to the traditional way. And let's face it, Tom, lawyers had to change their ways. We've been acting like dinosaurs for so many years. When I started virtual legal in 2013, that online law firms weren't a thing. And so it's just a small period of time, but huge change recently. So, and I think what that also means for other smaller businesses and the medium businesses as well is that we have to be, understanding how to operate in the online space. It's not just marketing. It's how we can actually keep our businesses safe, how we can create little risk triggers around what we do so that we don't end up dealing with, putting out fires. We see the fires or we see the smoke coming from a lot earlier. And when you can actually see the smoke, okay, well, I've got a disaster recovery plan that's in place. If this happens, this is what we do. If that happens, this is what we do. If this happens, we don't really have anything we can do, so we've insured that risk. So just making sure that they're actually looking ahead. So I think in all, it's more of an opportunistic way of looking at business moving forward because everyone's been belted fairly hard. Some people well more than others. But I think once people get back on their feet, it will be a different mindset around how to build business. And the tools to build business in a safer, better way will be accessible.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, really good summary there. I think what you've built is really amazing, and I think you're ahead of the curve, obviously, in the legal world because a lot of our clients we deal with a lot of law firms, and we're talking to them about well-being, and unfortunately, law groups on a whole would be on the lower well-being score sort of end just because of the nature of the work, I think, maybe in the model as well. So well done for building such a cool, accessible business. And I think for our listeners, if anyone's listening that is an SME owner and needs some legal advice or is interested in just checking out the platform, same for employees as well. Just get on and have a look. It's lawonearth.com.au. There it is on the screen there. Thanks so much, Katie, for your time. I really appreciate it and really enjoyed the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It's been great. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.